Welcome back to Footnotes Folly. I am Pemberton. This is part 26. Titus, unwilling to see so great a city destroyed, breaks off the assault for a while and tries persuasion. He sends Josephus, a Jew, a priest, their own former general, to stand before the walls and beg his countrymen to surrender. Recounting their whole history to move them, they answer with darts and jeers. By night the starving and the despairing steal out to desert to the Romans, some swallowing gold to carry it past the guards. And inside, the famine begins its slow, terrible work on those who remain. Let us continue.
Titus now decided to relax the siege for a little while, giving the seditious men an interval for reflection. He wanted to see whether the demolition of their second wall would make them somewhat more willing to comply, or whether they might have begun to fear famine, since the plunder they had gained by robbery could not last them long. He also used this pause to advance his own plans. The usual appointed time had come for distributing subsistence money to the soldiers, so he ordered the commanders to draw up the army in battle array in full view of the enemy, and then to give every soldier his pay. The soldiers, according to custom, opened the cases in which their arms had previously been kept covered, and marched wearing their breastplates. The horsemen also led out their horses in fine trappings. The areas in front of the city shone brilliantly for a great distance. Nothing was more pleasing to Titus's own men, or more terrible to the enemy, than that sight. The whole old wall and the north side of the temple were full of spectators, and one could see the houses filled with people looking on. No part of the city was not covered with multitudes of them. A very great consternation seized even the hardiest of the Jews when they saw the whole army gathered in one place, together with the fineness of their arms and the good order of their men. I cannot help thinking that the seditious would have changed their minds at that sight, if the crimes they had committed against the people had not been so horrible that they despaired of forgiveness from the Romans. Since they believed that death with torments would be their punishment if they did not continue defending the city, they thought it much better to die in war. Fate also prevailed so far over them that the innocent were to perish with the guilty, and the city was to be destroyed along with the seditious men inside it. The Romans spent 4 days distributing the subsistence money to the several legions. But on the 5th day, when no signs of peace appeared from the Jews, Titus divided his legions and began to raise banks both at the Tower of Antonia and at John's monument. His plan was to take the upper city at that monument and the temple at the Tower of Antonia, because if the temple were not taken, it would be dangerous to hold the city itself. So he raised banks at each of these places, each legion raising one. Against those working at John's monument, the Idumeans and the armed men with Simon made sallies and partly stopped their work. John's party, along with the multitude of zealots with him, did the same against those who were before the Tower of Antonia. The Jews were now too strong for the Romans, not only in direct fighting because they stood on higher ground, but also because they had now learned to use their own engines. Their continual use of these machines day after day gradually improved their skill with them. They had 300 engines for throwing darts and 40 for throwing stones, and by these means they made the raising of the Roman banks more tedious. Titus, however, knew that the city would either be saved or destroyed for himself. He therefore not only pressed the siege earnestly, but also did not neglect to exhort the Jews to repentance. He makes good counsel with his siege works. Knowing that exhortations are often more effective than arms, he urged them to surrender the city, which was now in a manner already taken, and so save themselves. He sent Josephus to speak to them in their own language, thinking they might yield to the persuasion of one of their own countrymen. Spare yourselves. Spare your country and your temple. Do not be more hardened in these matters than foreigners themselves. The Romans, who have no relation to these things, still reverence your sacred rites and places, although they belong to their enemies, and until now they have kept their hands from meddling with them. But you who were brought up under them, and who, if they are preserved, will be the only people to benefit from them, are hurrying to destroy them. You have certainly seen your strongest walls demolished, and the walls still remaining is weaker than those already taken. You must know that Roman power is invincible, and that you have long been accustomed to serve them. If it is right to fight for liberty, that should have been done at the beginning. But for people who have once fallen under Roman power, and submitted to them for so many long years, to pretend afterward to shake off that yoke is the work of men determined to die miserably, not of lovers of liberty. Men may well resent the dishonor of having base masters over them, but they ought not to resent submission to those who have all things under their command. What part of the world has escaped the Romans, except places made useless by extreme heat or extreme cold? It is clear that fortune has everywhere gone over to them, and that God, after carrying this dominion around the nations, has now settled it in Italy. There is also a strong and fixed law, among brute beasts as well as among men, to yield to those who are too strong for them, and to let those rule who prove superior to the rest in war. For this reason your forefathers, who were far superior to you in soul, body, and every other advantage, nevertheless submitted to the Romans. They would not have endured this if they had not known that God was with them. As for you, what can you rely on in this opposition, when the greatest part of your city has already been taken, and when those inside it are under greater miseries than if they had been captured, even though your walls still stand? The Romans are not ignorant of the famine in the city, by which the people are already being consumed, and in a little while the fighting men will be consumed as well. Even if the Romans should stop the siege and not attack the city with swords in their hands, an unconquerable war surrounds you within and grows stronger every hour, unless you are able to wage war against famine and fight it, or alone conquer your natural appetites. It is right for you to change your conduct before your calamities become incurable, and to follow counsel that may preserve you while the opportunity remains. The Romans will not remember your past actions to your disadvantage, unless you persist in your insolent behavior to the end. They are naturally mild in conquest and prefer what is profitable over what passion dictates. Their profit does not lie in leaving the city empty of inhabitants, or the country a desert. For this reason Caesar now offers you his right hand for your security. But if he takes the city by force, he will save none of you, especially if you reject his offers in this extremity. The walls already taken must assure you that the third wall will soon be taken also. And even if your fortifications prove too strong for the Romans to break through, famine will fight for the Romans against you. Josephus went around the wall as he made this appeal, trying to find a place that was out of reach of their darts but still within their hearing. In many words he begged them to spare themselves, their country, and their temple, and urged them to accept the opportunity of preservation before it was gone. While Josephus was making this exhortation to the Jews, many of them mocked him from the wall, and many reproached him. Some even threw darts at him. But when he could not persuade them by such open good advice, he turned to the histories of their own nation, and cried out aloud to them, "O miserable creatures, are you so forgetful of those who used to assist you that you will fight against the Romans with your weapons in your hands? When did we ever conquer any other nation by such means? And when did God, the creator of the Jewish people, fail to avenge them when they had been injured? Will you not turn back and consider why you fight with such violence, and how great a supporter you have profanely abused? Will you not call to mind the amazing things done for your forefathers and for this holy place, and how great enemies of yours were subdued under you by him? I tremble even to declare the works of God in the hearing of ears unworthy to hear them. Yet listen to me, so that you may understand that you are fighting not only against the Romans, but against God himself. In ancient times there was Necho, king of Egypt, also called Pharaoh. He came with an immense army of soldiers and seized Queen Sarah, the mother of our nation. What did Abraham, our progenitor, do then? Did he defend himself from this injurious man by war, although he had 318 captains under him, and an immense army under each of them? Indeed, he considered them no number at all without God's assistance. He only stretched out his hands toward this holy place, which you have now polluted, and relied on God as his invincible supporter instead of relying on his own army. Was not our queen sent back undefiled to her husband the very next evening, while the king of Egypt fled away, adoring this place that you have defiled by shedding the blood of your own countrymen on it? He trembled at the visions he saw in the night, and bestowed both silver and gold on the Hebrews, as on a people beloved by God. Shall I say nothing, or shall I mention the removal of our fathers into Egypt? They were treated tyrannically and fell under the power of foreign kings for 400 years together. They might have defended themselves by war and fighting, yet they did nothing but commit themselves to God. Who does not know that Egypt was overrun with all sorts of wild beasts and consumed by all sorts of diseases? How their land did not bring forth its fruit? How the Nile failed of water? How the 10 plagues of Egypt followed one after another? And how by these means our fathers were sent away under guard, without bloodshed and without danger, because God conducted them as his own peculiar servants. Moreover, did not Palestine groan under the ravage made by the Assyrians when they carried away our sacred ark? Did not their idol Dagon, and that whole nation which carried it away, suffer when they were struck with a loathsome disease in the secret parts of their bodies, and their very bowels came down with what they had eaten? Then the hands that had stolen the ark were forced to bring it back again, with the sound of cymbals and timbrels and other offerings, to appease the anger of God for their violation of his holy ark. It was God who then became our general and accomplished these great things for our fathers, because they did not involve themselves in war and fighting, but committed their affairs to him to judge. When Sennacherib, king of Assyria, brought all Asia with him and surrounded the city with his army, did he fall by human hands? Were not those hands lifted up to God in prayer without touching their weapons, when an angel of God destroyed that immense army in one night? When the Assyrian king rose the next day, he found 185,000 dead bodies, and with the remainder of his army he fled from the Hebrews, though they were unarmed and did not pursue them. You also know the slavery we endured in Babylon, where the people were captives for 70 years. Yet they were not delivered into freedom again until God made Cyrus his gracious instrument for bringing it about. Accordingly they were set free by him, and they again restored the worship of their deliverer at his temple. In general, we can produce no example in which our fathers gained success by war, or failed of success when they committed themselves to God without war. When they stayed at home, they conquered, as pleased their judge, but when they went out to fight, they were always disappointed. For example, when the king of Babylon besieged this very city, and our king Zedekiah fought against him contrary to the predictions made to him by Jeremiah the prophet, Zedekiah was immediately taken prisoner and saw the city and the temple demolished. Yet how much greater was the moderation of that king than that of your present governors, and how much greater was the moderation of the people then under him than yours at this time. When Jeremiah cried out aloud that God was very angry with them because of their transgressions, and told them they would be taken prisoner unless they surrendered their city, neither the king nor the people put him to death. But you have to pass over what you have done inside the city, which I cannot describe as your wickedness deserves. Abuse me and throw darts at me, though I only exhort you to save yourselves. You are provoked when you are reminded of your sins, and cannot bear even the mention of the crimes you commit every day. For another example, when Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes, lay before this city, and had committed many indignities against God, and our forefathers met him in arms, they were then killed in battle. The city was plundered by our enemies, and our sanctuary was made desolate for 3 years and 6 months. What need is there for me to bring more examples? Indeed, what can it be that has stirred up a Roman army against our nation? Is it not the impiety of the inhabitants? From where did our servitude begin? Was it not from the seditions among our forefathers, when the madness of Aristobulus and Hyrcanus, and our mutual quarrels, brought Pompey upon the city, and when God reduced under Roman subjection those who were unworthy of the liberty they had enjoyed? After a siege of 3 months, they were forced to surrender themselves, although they had not been guilty of such offenses against our sanctuary and our laws as you have, and although they had much greater advantages for war than you do. Do we not know the end that came to Antigonus, the son of Aristobulus, under whose reign God provided that this city should again be taken because of the people's offenses? When Herod, the son of Antipater, brought Socius upon us, and Socius brought the Roman army upon us, they were surrounded and besieged for 6 months, until, as punishment for their sins, they were taken and the city was plundered by the enemy. Thus it appears that arms were never given to our nation for success, but that we are always given up to be fought against and taken. I suppose that those who inhabit this holy place ought to commit the disposal of all things to God, and only then disregard human assistance, when they resign themselves to their arbitrator above. As for you, which of the things recommended by our legislator have you done? And which of the things he condemned have you not done? How much more impious are you than those who were so quickly taken? You have not even avoided the sins usually done in secret, I mean thefts, treacherous plots against men, and adulteries. You quarrel over robberies and murders and invent strange ways of wickedness. The temple itself has become the receptacle of all these things, and this divine place is polluted by the hands of our own countrymen. Yet this place has been reverenced by the Romans even when it was far from them, and they have allowed many of their own customs to give way to our law. After all this, do you expect the one whom you have so impiously abused to support you? Surely then, you have the right to be petitioners and to call on him to assist you, so pure are your hands. Did your king Hezekiah lift up such hands in prayer to God against the king of Assyria, when God destroyed that great army in one night? And do the Romans commit such wickedness as the king of Assyria did, so that you have reason to hope for the same vengeance upon them? Did not that king accept money from our king on condition that he would not destroy the city, and yet, contrary to the oath he had taken, come down to burn the temple? The Romans, however, demand no more than the accustomed tribute which our fathers paid to their fathers. If they may once obtain that, they do not aim to destroy the city or touch this sanctuary. No, they will also grant that your posterity shall be free, your possessions secured to you, and our holy laws preserved inviolate for you. It is plain madness to expect God to be as well disposed toward the wicked as toward the righteous, since he knows when it is proper to punish men immediately for their sins. Accordingly, he broke the power of the Assyrians the very first night after they pitched their camp. Therefore, if he had judged our nation worthy of freedom, or the Romans worthy of punishment, he would immediately have inflicted punishment on the Romans, as he did on the Assyrians, when Pompey first meddled with our nation, or when Socius afterward came up against us, or when Vespasian laid waste Galilee, or finally when Titus first came near the city. Yet Magnus and Socius not only suffered nothing, but took the city by force. Vespasian went from the war he made against you to receive the empire. As for Titus, the springs that were formerly almost dried up when they were under your power now, since he has come, run more plentifully than before. You know that Siloam, as well as all the other springs outside the city, failed so much before that water was sold by measure. Yet now they provide such a great quantity of water for your enemies that it is enough not only for drink for themselves and their cattle, but also for watering their gardens. You experienced the same wonderful sign formerly when the king of Babylon mentioned before made war against us, took the city, and burned the temple, though I believe the Jews of that age were not so impious as you are. Therefore I cannot help supposing that God has fled out of his sanctuary and stands on the side of those against whom you fight. Even a man, if he is a good man, will flee from an impure house and hate those who are in it. Do you persuade yourselves that God will remain with you in your iniquities, he who sees all secret things and hears what is kept most private? What crime among you, I ask, is even kept secret or concealed by you? What is there that is not open even to your enemies? You display your transgressions in a pompous manner and compete with one another over which of you will be more wicked. You make a public demonstration of your injustice as if it were virtue. Yet there remains a place for your preservation, if you are willing to accept it. God is easily reconciled to those who confess their faults and repent of them. O hard-hearted wretches that you are, throw away all your weapons and take pity on your country, already going to ruin. Turn back from your wicked ways and consider the excellence of that city which you are going to betray, and that excellent temple with the donations of so many countries in it. Who could bear to be the first to set that temple on fire? Who could be willing that these things should exist no more? What is there that better deserves to be preserved? O insensible creatures, more stupid than the stones themselves! And if you cannot look at these things with discerning eyes, at least have pity on your families. Set before each of your eyes your children, wives, and parents, who will gradually be consumed either by famine or by war. I know that this danger will extend to my mother, my wife, and my own family, which has by no means been ignoble, and indeed has been very eminent in ancient times. Perhaps you may imagine that I give you this advice only on their account. If that is all, kill them. No, take my own blood as a reward, if it can only obtain your preservation. For I am ready to die, if only you will return to a sound mind after my death. As Josephus spoke in this way with a loud voice, the seditious men would not yield to what he said, nor did they think it safe for themselves to change their conduct. But the people were strongly inclined to desert to the Romans. Accordingly, some of them sold what they owned, even the most precious things they had stored as treasures, for whatever small price they could get. They swallowed pieces of gold so that the robbers would not discover them. After they escaped to the Romans, they passed the gold from their bodies and had enough to provide plentifully for themselves. Titus allowed a great number of them to go away into the countryside wherever they wished. The main reasons they were so ready to desert were these: they would now be freed from the miseries they had endured in the city, and yet they would not be enslaved by the Romans. However, John and Simon, with their factions, watched more carefully for these men going out than for the Romans coming in. If anyone gave even the slightest shadow of suspicion that he intended to desert, his throat was cut immediately. For the richer sort, it made no difference whether they stayed in the city or tried to get out of it, for they were destroyed equally in both cases. Every such person was put to death under the pretense that he was going to desert, but in reality so that the robbers could take what he had. The madness of the seditious increased together with the famine, and both miseries grew more inflamed every day. No grain appeared publicly anywhere. Instead, the robbers came running into private houses and searched them. If they found any food, they tormented the owners because they had denied having it. If they found none, they tormented them worse, because they supposed they had hidden it more carefully. The sign they used to judge whether people had food was the condition of their bodies. If the miserable wretches were in good shape, the robbers assumed they had no lack of food at all. But if they were wasted away, the robbers left without searching further, and did not think it worthwhile to kill them, because they saw they would very soon die by themselves for want of food. Many people sold what they had for a single measure, wheat if they were among the richer sort, barley if they were poorer. After doing this, they shut themselves in the innermost rooms of their houses and ate the grain they had obtained. Some ate it without grinding it, because of the extremity of their need. Others baked bread from it, according as necessity and fear directed them. Nowhere was a table laid for a regular meal. Instead, they snatched the bread out of the fire half-baked and ate it very hastily. It was now a miserable condition, and a sight that would rightly bring tears to our eyes, to see how people stood with regard to food. The more powerful had more than enough, while the weaker lamented from want. Famine proves stronger than all other passions, and it destroys nothing so much as modesty. What would otherwise be worthy of reverence was despised in this condition. Children pulled the very morsels their fathers were eating out of their mouths. What was still more pitiable, mothers did the same to their infants. While those dearest to them were perishing under their hands, they were not ashamed to take from them the last drops that might preserve their lives. Even while they ate in this way, they were not hidden. The seditious came upon them everywhere at once and snatched away what they had gotten from others. Whenever they saw a house shut up, this was a signal to them that the people inside had obtained some food. They broke open the doors, ran in, and by force took pieces of what the people were eating almost out of their very throats. Old men who held tightly to their food were beaten. If women hid what they had in their hands, their hair was torn for doing so. No pity was shown either to the aged or to infants. They lifted children from the ground as they clung to the morsels they had gotten, and shook them down onto the floor. Still, they were even more barbarously cruel to those who had anticipated their entrance, and had already swallowed what the robbers meant to seize, as if the robbers had been unjustly deprived of their right. They also invented terrible methods of torture to discover where any food was. They stopped up the passages of the private parts of the miserable wretches and drove sharp stakes up their fundaments. A man was forced to endure things terrible even to hear about, in order to make him confess that he had one loaf of bread, or reveal a hidden handful of barley meal. This was done even when the tormentors themselves were not hungry. It would have been less barbarous if necessity had forced them to it. Instead, they did it to keep their madness in practice, and to prepare provisions for themselves for the following days. These men also went out to meet those who had crept out of the city by night as far as the Roman guards, in order to gather wild plants and herbs. When those people thought they had escaped the enemy, the robbers snatched away what they had brought with them. The sufferers often entreated them, calling upon the tremendous name of God, to give back some part of what they had brought. But the robbers would not give them even the smallest crumb. The victims had to be satisfied that they were only robbed and not killed at the same time. These were the afflictions that the lower sort of people suffered from the guards of the tyrants. But men who had dignity and were also rich were brought before the tyrants themselves. Some were falsely accused of laying treacherous plots and were destroyed. Others were charged with plans to betray the city to the Romans. The easiest method of all was to bribe someone to declare that they had resolved to desert to the enemy. Whoever had been utterly stripped by Simon was sent back again to John, and from those already plundered by John, Simon took what remained. In this way, they drank the blood of the populace from one another and divided the dead bodies of the poor creatures between them. Although their ambition for dominion made them contend with each other, they agreed very well in their wicked practices. The one who did not share with the other tyrant what he had gained from the miseries of others seemed too little guilty in only one respect. And the one who did not receive a share of what was communicated to him grieved over it as over the loss of something valuable, because he had no part in such barbarity. It is therefore impossible to go through every particular instance of these men's iniquity. I will give my judgment here briefly. No other city ever suffered such miseries, and no age from the beginning of the world ever produced a generation more fruitful in wickedness than this one. In the end, they brought the Hebrew nation into contempt, so that they themselves might appear comparatively less impious in the eyes of strangers. They confessed what was true, that they were the slaves, the scum, and the spurious and abortive offspring of our nation. They themselves overthrew the city and forced the Romans, whether they wished it or not, to gain a sad reputation by acting gloriously against them. They almost drew that fire upon the temple which they seemed to think came too slowly. Indeed, when they saw the temple burning from the upper city, they were not troubled by it and shed no tears over it, though such feelings were shown by the Romans themselves. These circumstances we shall discuss hereafter in their proper place, when we come to treat of those matters.
And we will stop there, with Josephus' pleas rejected and the famine tightening its grip on the trapped city. Next time, in part 27, the last and darkest part of Book 5, the crucifixions before the walls, the great wall of circumvallation Titus throws round the city to starve it utterly, and the famine deepening into atrocity. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.